At midnight, in the quaint village of Hydesville, New York, 1843, all was quiet except for a faint whistle of wind threatening an early winter. A young housekeeper named Jane slept off a hard day's work at the home of the Weekmans. She woke with a start, sure she heard a rapping through the floor. Not at the door. No, not a neighbor. Not from the wall. Not one of the children of the house playing. But from the floor. The cellar. Could it have been an animal? If so, she better find its secret entrance in the morning and stuff the hole before it became a bigger problem, she thought. She took a quick inventory from memory of the contents of the cellar, reassuring herself that there was nothing a rat could destroy, letting her eyelids close once more. Then, more fervently, the rapping repeated. Mr. Weekman had been particularly agitated of late from sleep deprivation. He'd be upset if she wasted a candle on investigating a noise of the night, but more so if that noise woke him from the sleep he's been fighting for. Just as she decided to spend the wax now and replace her candle the next time she walked past the Chandler's house, there again came the rapping. How she yearned for the Chandler's warm, happy stoop from her windowless room near the cellar. By the spark of steel from her tinderbox, she jumped at the shape of a tall man with a large trunk opening the cellar door and missing the chance to light her tinder. Resisting the urge to pull the bag cover back over her head, shaking from more than the cold, she quickly struck the steel again over the tinderbox. She lit her candle in the end and swept the light over the room. It was empty, the door shut. Of course, she breathed. This room was the only entrance to the cellar. She had let her sleepiness and her fright get the better of her in the dark. Before she could even consider keeping the flame lit the rest of the night, another loud rapping shook the floor beneath her, revealing the stairway to the cellar with a creak and the same faint figure now beckoning her down. Barefoot, shivering, and praying under her breath, Jane traversed the 12 steps, wondering if they would be her last. Turning the corner, however, she saw only the empty cellar. All was in its place except for a glint of something shiny on the dirt floor. She approached the sparkle, nearly losing her footing on the uneven floor, sinking exponentially towards the center of the room. But there, she found in the dark dirt a pristine, polished silver thimble. Throughout the 18th and the 19th century, contrasting ideologies within Christian faiths began to arise. Calvinist leanings in Protestant churches following the Civil War formally espoused the highest authority of singular salvation by way of the acceptance of the sacrificial teachings of the New Testament. You know the story. His only begotten Son died so our souls could be cleansed. And now, the only thing to do was to wait in still, silent allegiance for the ever-approaching rapture. Colloquially, however, a growing trend of comforting the mourning by suggesting a closer, more earthly heaven, a better place from which loved ones lost to the war or children passed before their time could live peacefully and watch over the living from God's kingdom, or even here on earth. Early modern spiritualists in the U.S. sought to investigate the afterlife and communicate with those who have reached it throughout the 19th century. Although spiritualist practices often were contingent on the belief shared with Christianity that each person has a soul separate from its living consciousness, that life continued after death, and that the angels in heaven were watching over us. Many Christians felt the attempts to contact these souls were ungodly and that the spirits reached were demonic, if they existed at all. In stark contrast to the rigidity and the brutality of most Christian denominations of the time, which offered only one strict path to salvation and eternal life, spiritualism offered pathways to commune with loved ones and seek answers to questions left unanswered by the church. But herein lies the problem. It was control that the church stood to lose. The, quote, better place available to all who passed offered unprecedented equality. Without a hierarchy, the church could not maintain itself as the closest to God and the highest order of authority. Communication with the other side, real or not, gives a voice to those once silent, alive and dead. Spiritualism seemingly puts power into the hands, onto the kitchen tables of anybody, any sex, race, and creed who asks. If a soul exists within each human life, if life continues after death, eternally even, can the dead see and hear us? Do they exist among us? Why should we not seek to better understand the nature of existence by reaching out to the great unknown? The house was the perfect sanctuary for the family repairing itself after over a decade of separation due to alcoholism and loss. Margaret Fox, the matriarch, strained to care for her family as her husband John Fox waned in his ability to work as a blacksmith and remained the strong father figure and husband he'd once been proud to be. One child passed. 4 more married and moved out. Time marched forward. Love and dedication prevailed, returning John Fox back to sobriety and back to his family. While staying with Leah Fox Fish, their eldest living daughter, a single mother and musician, they decided to settle nearby in rural New York State. Finally, mother, father, and the 2 youngest girls moved into the hamlet near an uncle's land and a smithy where John could work and build a more permanent structure. Little did they know, they would be the last living residents of the cottage in Hydesville, New York. On March 31st, 1848, the first clear spring day after a long, cold winter in their new home, 14-year-old Maggie and 12-year-old Kate inquired for an audience with a few neighbors in the modest Methodist hamlet. They'd come across a phenomenon that they could not explain. The neighbors, I'm sure, were just as eager to enter the cottage themselves, having witnessed 3 families move away from the idyllic family farm on fertile soil in just 5 years. Who were these excitable young women knocking on their doors? What caused the previous families to leave abruptly? Would this family stay or be frightened away as the others? To their new neighbors, they explained how they'd been sleeping in their parents' bedroom for the past 2 weeks, if you could even call it sleep. Rather, they'd been up and down each night at periodic knocks from the other end of the house, and their father had grown irate and exhausted from trying to stay on guard for his girls. He insisted at first that the faint rapping was simply the wooden house settling, noises from outside, or one of them in the other room. They tested this hypothesis. Margaret would stand in the empty room where the rapping was heard that night. John would stand on the opposite side of the closed door, keeping a close eye on the girls. He saw no way that Kate and Maggie could have been tricking them, as they stood nearby with bated breath themselves. The next knocks seemed to come from the wall between man and wife. We heard footsteps in the pantry, and walking downstairs, we could not rest, and I then concluded that the house must be haunted by some unhappy, restless spirit. I had often heard of such things, but had never witnessed anything of the kind I could not account for before. The disruptions continued, popping and cracking rhythmically before growing to distinct knocks that managed to rattle the floor. As spring approached, the tremors and raps spread into every room, upsetting bedside candlesticks and shifting furniture. John grew more paranoid as his sleep and the safety of his family were compromised. The young concerned daughters tested and rationalized, just as their father did before, to comfort him. My youngest child, Kathy, said, "Mr. Splitfoot, do as I do," clapping her hands. The sound instantly followed her with the same number of raps. Margaretta said in sport, "Now, do just as I do. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, striking one hand against the other at the same time, and the raps came as before. Then Kathy said, in her childish simplicity, "Oh, Mother, I know what it is. Tomorrow is April Fool's Day, and it's somebody trying to fool us." Margaret decided to do a test of her own. If there was a Splitfoot devil in her home, she needed to know. She asked the house, or whatever lingered within it, to knock the ages of her children. She motioned to her daughters to be silent and watched her husband's eyes for confirmation. Together, They counted the knocks as they corresponded with their children's ages for several minutes. 33 knocks for Anna Lay, 31 for Maria, 29 for Elizabeth, 27 for David, 14 for Margareta, 12 for Catherine, and finally, devastating the tired parents all over again, 3 knocks for their late Emily, her stomach twisting at a loss for what to do. Margaret sent their daughters out into the community to ask for help or answers as to what was happening at the 4 frightened foxes. At the very least, perhaps the house would quiet in their absence, enough to give John an hour or two of rest. John's eyelids felt heavy as the sun shined in through the window. There was work to do in the smithy, but whatever was going on, he couldn't leave his wife alone in this forsaken home. He wouldn't abandon her again. He clutched his ball-peen hammer in his lap as he rocked in his chair. He hardly started at all when he heard the rapping. It creeped into the daytime now, becoming an incessant, invisible resident. Softly, knock, knock, knock. He suddenly remembered the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, a desperate mother sending her son away to sell the cow to make it through the winter, and discarding the mere magic beans with which he had returned. The ground warming, soil loosening as spring approached. He could envision a sprout starting in the cellar. Could it be, so far from sunlight? The sprout began to bow the wood above it, disturbing the furniture, breaking through the floor, the windows, the roof, growing larger than Jack could imagine. Suddenly, his eyes shot open as his hammer hit the floor. As if in response, a loud knock resounded beneath his feet. He looked up to yell for Margaret, only to see her standing in the doorway watching him. Neighbor after neighbor called on the foxes to witness the phenomenon for themselves. Each needed their own confirmation. They quizzed the disembodied entity on their own ages and secrets, receiving simple responses and a number of knocks for affirmation, or silence for negative. And through a series of interviews in this fashion, they ascertained the tragedy of Mr. Charles B. Rosna. 31-year-old Charles B. Rosna was a husband and father of 5. He supported his household by peddling goods door to door. He tempted mothers and housekeepers with quality supplies for their housework, and charmed wives with shining silver thimbles and intricate lace. Shouldering a large trunk and a basket one evening in 1843, he smiled on the doorstep he knew to belong to Dr. Henry Hyde, for whom Hydesville was named. The village was far from the cities, which packed in more houses, and this home was smaller than some of the others in the slowly growing area. Still, he knew this stop would be worth the long pilgrimage in the late night. Mrs. Hyde could do little needlework anymore with her old shaking hands, but she could still find some ribbon or silk to be delighted by. The good doctor would not resist the girlish pink in her cheeks after all these years. She would not have to ask before purchasing more than she needed, if only to gift the wares to the younger women at the church. The thought of the aging couple made him miss his wife back in Newark, warm and frazzled by the 5 little ones distracting her from the simmering supper pot. His face fell for a moment when a young woman answered the door, short and dressed as a child, but tired and disheveled as a grown woman, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good eve, miss. Is Mrs. Hyde about?" "Not Hyde, sir, no." She did not move to let him in. Her mother told her not to give information to strange men, but she wasn't sure if that applied in this household. She was new to housekeeping and still learning the fickle preferences of her lady. At any rate, she was thankful that Mrs. Bell had not sent her away yet. The prospect of a stranger in the neighborhood at dusk frightened her. "Mr. Bell will be home soon," she added. "Is the lady of the house home? You see, I have some goods with me that I think she would like to see." He peered over her shoulder for a hint. A light approached from the stairway. The door creaked further open, and a delicate hand dismissed the girl with a simple "Lucretia." Mrs. Bell motioned for Charles to enter, guiding him to the table. Lucretia worked nearby, sweeping soot from the hearth. Unnerved but eager to make his trip fruitful, Charles displayed a few items from the trunk for the middle-aged woman. He touted the warming effects of the wool, the cooling flax materials. Mrs. Bell seemed unfazed by his practical wares. Seeking to dazzle her, he reached back into his basket. I have here a set of 6 silver buttons, 3 sizes silver needles, though one will last a lifetime, and a silver thimble. Perfect for the delicate work of an expert seamstress, he said. Lucretia's attention was piqued. She did need a thimble to do the lady's mending, and even if she could not afford this one, she may not have had many chances in her life to hold something as fine. She approached the table with trepidation and picked up the distinct little thimble. Mrs. Bell reprimanded. It is more than your monthly wages, and you've not been here as long as that, Lucretia. Charles pivoted, as any good salesman can. Even if I wasn't doing my own mending, I would prefer my household work only with precious metals to avoid staining and mistakes. You see, the metal warms to your hand, and over time seems to fit only the wearer. I'd like, of course, to keep all these silver items together, but if you're the rare kind with no need for buttons. He was interrupted by the entrance of Mr. Bell. Enough ridiculous patter, Mrs. Bell scoffed. Perhaps you could bring it to my father's home in the morning, Lucretia requested. He may see it fit for me to have for my work. You'll not have work, girl, for letting a strange man waste my time in the absence of my husband. And with that, Mrs. Bell dismissed Lucretia indefinitely. Without chaperone or carriage, she returned to her father's house empty-handed in the dark. For 3 days, Lucretia waited to be called on by the Bells. Afraid that if it was true she may have lost her opportunity to pay for school if she'd given herself a bad reputation so early with Mrs. Bell. Much to her confusion, Mrs. Bell did request that she return. In a bright spirit, she offered room and board, a bed in the buttery by the cellar door, if she could keep the house clean and free of rats. Mrs. Bell claimed the rats were digging and loosening the dirt in the cellar, trekking it throughout the house and making loud noises in the night. Lucretia agreed to the terms. She was surprised to find indeed her own bed inexplicably blocking the cellar door in the buttery, and piled already with mending projects. Upon the material sat a box holding the thimble she so coveted, needle, and a spool of strong thread. Mrs. Bell's behavior continued to confuse the young maid. One day, there would be gifts such as the silver thimble. The next, fits of rage and worry. The lady's health began to suffer, and soon, she truly did need the assistance of Lucretia to move about the house. Mr. Bell was rarely present. When he was home, he seemed to spend his time banging on the walls in his own fits, or barging into Lucretia's room to tow large rocks to the cellar. Then, there was banging through the floor even when Mr. Bell wasn't home, and in the night when the couple was asleep upstairs. The final straw was the cursed cellar itself. One afternoon, she went down through the outside entrance, of course, to ensure both doors were securely shut and locked. Losing her footing on the rocks and dirt, she slipped and fell further than the floor itself, seemingly sinking into the ground. She felt as if the devil himself was pulling her downward. She scrambled for the steps to the cellar door, screaming for help she knew would not come. When she made it out, she pleaded with her employer not to be made to return to the cellar. Their solution was simply more rock, and Lucretia's solution was leaving. Shortly after, the Bells moved as well. Is it a spirit? If it was an injured spirit, make 2 raps. Were you injured in this house? Is the person living that injured you? Will you continue to rap if I call in my neighbors that they may hear it too? The Foxes and their neighbors gathered as much information as they could via their crude communication with Charles B. Rosna. As circumstances escalated, their son David brought his family to help the aging mother and father recover. Their attention, however, quickly shifted to recovering what lay beneath their feet. One of the following possibilities had to be true, and each were terrifying in their own ways. Number 1, the Foxes had made up their stories and were managing to trick their neighbors and loved ones. Many believe that to this day, Kate and Maggie were the ones making noises all along, as the activity seemed to depend somewhat upon their presence. Perhaps this was an April Fool's prank after all. Why would their sisters antagonize their parents so relentlessly? Why would they themselves lose sleep? And how would they have answered the questions the visitors to their home asked the entity? Have you ever told a lie that spiraled entirely out of control? Number 2. The family, the town, and soon the nation experienced a collective delusion, one that is dormant in each of us, our own minds working against us. Number 3. Something darker was trickling the town of Hydesville, a quiet evil opening its maw to pronounce its presence. Perhaps it was the work of Mr. Splitfoot, like little Catherine Fox suggested. The hooved beast from below, the devil tempting the foxes towards a path of satanic seances and immoral infamy. Number 4. The remains of a poor peddler had been decaying in the basement for 5 years. A father and husband had been murdered by a consumer. His throat was slit for all he could carry. A collection equaling $500, or around $15,000 to $18,000 today. His body was dragged to the cold cellar, buried in a shallow grave and covered in vein by rocks. His spirit was trapped on this mortal plane by greed and envy. If so, the Fox family found a way to speak to the dead, and the dead spoke back. By the end of April 1848, Margaret left her husband once more to protect her family, not from alcoholism, but whatever waited in their basement. She took Catherine and Margaretta to their eldest sister's home in Newark, while John and David descended the stairs with shovels. They sought a conclusion to their waking nightmare. Beneath the dirt floor, they found a chasm of questions and a lifetime of phantasmic fixation. What do you think happened to the Fox family? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And also make sure you're subscribed. This is the first part to a multi-part series where we dive into the Fox sisters and their family. But for now, for tonight, I think we have to add the legend of the Fox sisters and the birth of spiritualism to our never-ending, but our always growing Tales from the Dark.